Okay, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome. It's 1 minute past 11 where I am. And let's start with this session. This is the third session in the Knowledge, Equity and Open Scholarship Week. My name is Jeroen Bosman from Utrecht University in the Netherlands. I will host this meeting. Please note that the session will be recorded, and recording will be shared with the attendees afterwards. If you're comfortable with that, please introduce yourself in the chat, just mentioning your name and potentially where you are from or what your role is. This week is organized by the wonderful group of people from various institutions in parts of the world. Sativ in Algeria, Pretoria in South Africa, Leeds and Salford in the UK, SUS in Tunisia, and Utrecht in the Netherlands. The organizing institutions and people from those institutes connect through the Knowledge Equity Network. And here you see the full program. After this session that you're in right now, there will be more sessions, for instance, on open education, on long-form scholarship, but also 2 sessions showcasing and reflecting on our co-creation experiments that people worked on over the past few weeks. Please note that on the Knowledge Equity website, there is also in the resources section an opportunity to check out more information on these sessions, and also specifically on the various things that were created in the co-creation, blog posts, infographics, and other contributions from those groups. And please scan the code and take a moment to look at those contributions and potentially also vote for any one of them, the one which inspired you most, for instance. For today, we really welcome diverse perspectives, and we ask everyone to be kind, to engage with kindness, to engage with professionalism. Looking forward to the session. The topic for today is publishing. So our main question that we focus on is how can we create more equitable publishing ecology? We will discuss things like equitable participation in publishing, incentives in the system, bibliodiversity, and anything in between. So that's a whole lot, and it's all connected, as we know. In the spirit of the CAN network, we hope that this session will also contribute to mutual learning, to potential collaborations. We'll see how that goes. Before we dive deep into our topic, let's see who is in the room. We already got a lot of people attending, and of course, we have a really, really great and hugely experienced group of panelists today who will set the stage for our discussion. So let me briefly introduce them before I give them the floor for their opening statements. So from York, we have Sarah Thompson. Sarah is the Associate Director of the Library at York, with a strategic role in oversight of the library budget. Looking at the money is always a good thing to be able to do. From African Journals Online, we are joined by Susan Murray, its Executive Director. And then we have 2 panelists from the University of Pretoria, Beth Roux, who as a professor of publishing studies is researching and teaching in the field of publishing. And we've got Khawulile Radebe, who is a manager of scholarly communications and repositories, and in that role supporting publishing and scholarly communication at large at the University Library. And our 5th panelist is Monica Westin at Cambridge University Press, where she is Director of Open Policy Development, with a second hat on from DORA, the Declaration on Research Assessment. So let's hear their opening statements. And just another brief reminder to look at the full program on the CAN website and maybe dive into those co-creation contributions. So I'll stop sharing now, and maybe I'll give the word first to Sarah. Sarah, could you please briefly introduce yourself and tell us what you've been working on at York that ties to the topic of our session?
Yeah, really pleased to be here. Thank you for the introduction, Jeroen. Yes, so as Jeroen said, I'm Sarah from the University of York Library. York's an institution in the north of England. For those of you who are not aware, it's a medium-sized teaching and research intensive institution, so it has a dual focus. We have about 20,000 students and about 30 different departments and schools and research centres. We're also highly collaborative. So a lot of what we've been able to achieve in our library is because of the collaborations we have with others. So I'm particularly going to mention those that have been in place for a long time now. So White Rose Libraries is a key partner for us. That includes the University of Leeds and the University of Sheffield. And we work very closely with them in the area of publishing in particular. So for example, we've had a shared institutional repository now for over 20 years, White Rose Research Online. So that's where our research outputs are uploaded by our researchers. We also have a shared institutional university press, White Rose University Press, which is fully open access. And this is the 10th year since the White Rose University Press was founded. So we in York itself, we have been supporting open access publishing via the Green Route for many years. We have been buying into read and publish agreements for many years, so we have enabled as much as possible for our researchers. That is a challenge, though, when it comes to financial difficulties. So 2 years ago, we had a big cut to our budget, and we had to look really closely at what we could continue and what we needed to stop supporting. So that's been a really interesting process. I can say a little bit about that later. We have worked really closely with another group of university libraries in the north of England that's known as the N8. So there are 8 of us in that region that are particularly research intensive. And we've worked collectively to support each other as we were developing each institutional rights retention policy. So all of the eight institutions now have rights retention in place. And we supported each other through that process. We had to do it individually in our institutions, but doing that collectively was important to us. And then we went on to build on that with a kind of position statement on sustainable scholarly publishing across those 8 institutions, which was really articulating why we believe publishing needs to move to a more sustainable, by that I mean particularly affordable and equitable model and range of models. And we're currently working at that in my institution on following that up with an institutional position statement from York itself. So yes, I'll stop there, but that's what we're doing in a nutshell.
Thank you. That's already a lot, and good to hear of so many regional and local collaborations that you're in. Thank you very much, Sarah. Susan, could you go next and also give a brief introduction on where you are and what you are currently working on at African Journals Online?
Yeah, certainly. I'm just hoping to share my screen as I was able to earlier, but unfortunately it's not cooperating right now. Again.
Just take a moment maybe to retry.
Doesn't matter. I will talk about it. So African Journals Online is a nonprofit organization that was started in the late 90s in order to make visible the research that was being published from within the African continent. Increasingly, we realized, though, that because the norms and standards and structures and systems that had been put in place to assign quality to research publishing entities were set up by and for commercial northern entities for the most part, and that there was AJOL was being used as a kind of a proxy for inclusion in some of those types of entities by researchers whose content had been published in journals that had been accepted to the platform. So we stepped up to that in the form of formalizing our assessment criteria for journals that are accepted into the platform in what we call the Journal Publishing Practices and Standards Framework. We believe strongly that transparency leads to trust, and this is a framework that is both transparency of what the partner journals on Agile are achieving in terms of their publishing practices and standards, and in terms of what is acceptable according to global norms everywhere, but also incorporates kind of contextual norms and requirements for journals publishing from resource scarce environments. And obviously we're representing and working to support and train and for capacity development of journals that are publishing from 40 countries in the African continent, and each of those countries has a widely diverse set of contexts and situations. So we try to be both context appropriate and respectful in terms of inclusion of multilingualism and various other approaches, as well as assisting journals to attain those markers of quality and prestige and inclusion that are familiar with librarians and what have you from the other side of the world, for example. We're actively promoting diamond open access scholarly publishing as a norm in resource scarce contexts. And in that, we are involved in international collaborations like the Almasi project, which is 16 different organizations from Europe, Latin America, and Africa working towards that end. And also IFL and the WACRAN, the Western Central African Research and Education Network, working towards affordable, sustainable diamond open access publishing. And we believe that this is the best means to allow for active inclusion and engagement of researchers and faculty from the Global South in contributing to not just share their research and engage actively in the global discourse in their fields, but also to be in a position to direct the research agendas and topics that they pick in terms of solving local solutions, as well as contributing to global challenges. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for that introduction into the marvelous work you are doing. It's obvious that it's a complex and very diverse transformation that we are in the middle of. So thank you for that, and we'll come back to some of the things that you are doing later in the session. Next, let's move to Pretoria. Beth or Khawulile, I don't know who likes to go first. Beth?
Go first, and then Khawulile can talk about the library, I think.
Yeah, super. Go ahead.
So, yeah, because we're talking from different perspectives, I think. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking from the perspective more of an individual, actually, than an institution, because I'm sit at a very interesting nexus, I think, here of I teach publishing studies, so I work with students all the time about what are different publishing models and different ways of publishing. I also am myself an academic author, an editor. I've worked on various journals, and I also, in my own research, have worked on university presses and academic freedom in particular. So I still work directly with several university presses, especially in South Africa. But then the one thing I wanted to talk a bit about that I think might have the most bearing on this is that I work with a group that is busy investigating the subsidy system relating to academic publishing in South Africa. So I'm part of a group working on the Publications Quality Framework Project. That's what I have to get all the words right in that order. So that's from our Department of Higher Education and Training, so government department, the Academy of Sciences of South Africa, and then also a specific research team at the University of Stellenbosch, the CREST team. So in South Africa, we have a very specific subsidy system to encourage more active publication from South African authors. And this has in fact been in place since the 1990s, but it's only really been successful and had a big difference from about 2003, 2004, when they changed the system a bit. So this is a subsidy system based on a certain number of units that authors produce, and it's a subsidy from the Department of Higher Education and Training that contributes to the research fund for various universities then. It's been very successful in some ways, and it has a kind of a focus on creating more equity in the sense of creating more visibility for South African research globally, making it more playing on a more even playing field perhaps, but also making sure that the kinds of issues that are most relevant for South African research are actually being done by South African researchers as well, and in collaborations. So, for instance, issues of public health relating to tuberculosis and malaria, perhaps, certain areas of agriculture, and others that are very relevant for our situation in South Africa. Is what we have found a great deal in the past is scholars from the north coming to a country like South Africa for a short time and then publishing the research internationally, and then there's no real benefit, no feedback into the entire publication system or the higher education system in this country. So the successes of this, from what we've been examining, has to do with increasing the number of South African authors, but also the number of collaborations, which has been interesting to see. So we're getting more international authors publishing with local authors in terms of the subsidy, which has been an unintended consequence, I think, but a really important one in terms of openness of our research and sharing with the rest of the world. And it has also contributed to the greater visibility of our research too. So, there's more dissemination of research results and people are becoming more aware of this. Partly this is also because it encourages publication in certain kinds of journals in particular, especially those that are included in certain international indexes. So like Scopus or like the Web of Science, for example. So that has both negative and positive effects. The system doesn't directly reward open access in any way. So whether an article is published in a traditional fees-based, subscription-based journal or book publisher, or whether it is open access, that is not the basis for the subsidy or this reward system in any way. It has to do with whether these are considered of international quality, and the proxy for that quality is the international databases or indexes. And this has had an effect on bibliodiversity. This is one of the areas where I'm doing research at the moment. So if you are rewarding publications or scholarship in the big international journals, the big international publishers, then you are actually doing this to the detriment of the local book trade and the local international, the local scholarly publishing environment as well. The entire ecosystem of scholarly publishing within South Africa is in fact threatened by this kind of subsidy, which is certainly an unintentional consequence. Language diversity we also find is undermined because the largest international publishers and journals are working in the former colonial languages, really. So it really, in our context, privileges any kind of publication in English and not really in any of the local languages. So there is a bit of an effect on the diversity of the kinds of research that is rewarded and encouraged within South Africa. So there are definitely threats that are there for the sustainability of a smaller local publishing ecosystem, where it would be far more prestigious for someone to publish with one of the big international publishers than to try to have their work published locally. So we have been looking at ways of improving that. Maybe there are ways to adjust the subsidy system or the reward system so that we can also reward publication in not only South African, but also African journals as well, so that there's more collaboration within the African continent and within the global South, rather than simply the North and South kind of divide. And I think I'll stop there for now. So thanks.
Thank you. Over to you, Khawulile. You're still muted, I guess. That's better.
Sorry, I'm going to share my slides.
Yes, we're seeing your slide right now.
Is it on a presentation mode?
Yes, it is in presentation mode. It is still with your comments or notes next to them, but that's no problem. We can see them.
Okay.
Please just go ahead. We can see them fine right now.
You might be muted. You might need to unmute as well.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, we can hear you now and we can see your slide. Please go ahead, Khawulile.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Okay, so at the University of Pretoria, we have research policies. I think those help and guide our researchers in terms of producing research that is ethical and has impact and contribute to the strategic and values of the university. So first things first, we need to have policies that will guide us on how we are going to do certain things. And then we also, as the library, support open access publishing for our researchers. For example, we advocate for our researchers to publish open access. And we also offer workshops and webinars and faculty visits to do advocacy. And we have developed a researcher visibility checker tool where we assist our researchers to be visible in different research platforms. For example, Scopus, Clarivate, and Google Scholar, and have ORCID profiles. So when a researcher doesn't have a certain profile, for example, in Google Scholar, we will assist them to have a profile there so that they increase their visibility. We also offer bibliometrics and altmetrics reports for our researchers so that they are able to track their citations as well, their social engagements of their research. And we also have an APC fund that we administer as the library, where we assist researchers who are publishing on gold journals. We assist them with their APCs. And then we are also in the agreements, the SANDLIC agreements for transformational agreements, where our researchers can publish without paying any APCs. So that's just to assist them to publish open access without paying any high article processing charges. And then we have institutional repositories, such as the U-Space, where we archive articles, our electronic theses and dissertations, as well as conference papers. So that's the research output of the university. We archive it there for accessibility and visibility. And then we have a UP Research Data Repository, which is FactShare, and all our researchers and postgrad students are required to submit the data that is underpinning their research output. We have open journal systems where the departments of the university can publish journals. I think at the moment we're hosting about 15 journals that are available on our repositories. And then we have open monographs as well, where we assist our researchers to publish. And then in terms of the transformational agreements, this is just to illustrate that when we started with the transformational agreements, the uptake was not really good. In 2021, we had one agreement and we published only one article. And over the years, we are seeing the growth, as you can see on the graph, the number of agreements, fast forward to 2025, the number of agreements that we have is 10 agreements where our researchers are able to publish without paying any APCs. And we have published in 2025 more than 700 articles. So yeah, that was just an illustration, and that is through advocacy of open access publishing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khawulile. Please stop sharing your screen. Yeah, that's all very recognizable, and you're doing all the hard work of day-to-day supporting researchers. That is clear in many ways. Thank you for that. Finally, Monica, could I give you the floor to provide a brief statement on where you are and where your organizations are regarding our topic?
Yes, thank you. And thanks to everyone for attending, and thank you for inviting me. So by training, I'm a librarian, and I've worked in US and UK research and higher education libraries, doing work that ranged from running diamond publishing programs to, in my most recent library job, leading collections development and licensing strategy. I currently work for the first time in my career at a publisher. So I'm currently the director of open policy development at Cambridge University Press, where I work on our always developing open access models, our open research policies, our transparency policies, and currently I'm working on developing our policy positions on related areas like responsible research assessment. In sort of the context of the day-to-day, equity and its role in open models, I think might be interesting to talk about later. At Cambridge, we've officially moved the Cambridge Open Equity Initiative from an early pilot into an established program, which I'm happy to talk about later. I would say my current closest communities right now are the open research community at Cambridge University. So at the universities, I serve on our Cambridge-wide Open Research Steering Committee. That includes the press, the library, the research office, the research culture group. And the reason I mention that is even though we're an open research group, we're increasingly very focused on the reform of reward and recognition, responsible use of metrics. And wearing my other hat today, I'm also on the steering group at DORA, the Declaration on Research Assessment. So I would say one of my personal interests right now is the connection between open science or open research, responsible research assessment, and equity. And more in my current role, it's clear that just making things open, just open access alone is not enough. And I'm working to connect all of these issues in Cambridge's policies. And I'm actually teaching a session next week for Open Air as their open science policy training program on the connection between reform of research assessment and open science. So I think that covers my two main areas, and I might just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. It's clear that you have a sort of pivotal position between all the forces that are pushing our publishing systems in various directions. That's very interesting. Thanks all for providing these opening statements. I would like to dive a little bit deeper now and also suggest again to anyone attending that you can put your questions in the Q&A if you want to. So maybe first look at what you might call sort of elephant in the room, a small elephant or a big elephant, and that is the read and publish deals, or transformative agreements, as some would like to call them. I think all the topics that you mentioned and the angles you are taking at really resonate with a lot of people. A lot of people probably also attending right now. Looking at the transformative agreements. Sarah, maybe a question for you. When you moved away at York for a moment in time from those transformative agreements, was that just because of sheer budget constraints, or did you also see, or did some people see that as a chance to contribute to more equity in the system by moving publishing to other journals?
That's a really good question. I think most of the driver came from a big budget reduction. We'd gradually been building up our portfolio of read and publish agreements. So we had practically all the major ones and a lot of smaller ones as well over time. Then when it came to having a big reduction, we had to look at, in order to meet it, we just had practically to look at our biggest areas of spend and where we could make savings. And we couldn't avoid cancelling those big agreements. So for those, it was very much driven by that. But there was also an element on the choice we made is what we chose not to cut, I would say. So we had been investing over the years, and we continue to support community-led initiatives such as Open Book Collective, more recently the Open Journal Collective. We've pledged support to that. Open infrastructures. So we felt very strongly that we should not reduce those. So we have, in a way, I suppose there's a tacit kind of values decision being made there, but primarily it was driven by pragmatism, because let's face it, the big agreements are the most expensive, and you're never going to make huge savings by cancelling the more equitable, smaller cost agreements as well. But we felt that was a really important positioning, and something that we are continuing to talk about with our community at York. I mentioned we're kind of working on an institutional position statement on publishing and publishing culture at the moment. And this is all part of the mix that we're discussing with our academics. So it's been very difficult for people to lose those access to the vast amount of content that we had in those agreements. It's been a big shock. So we're now in the second year of being out of them. It's created a lot of debate and discussion. As I'm sure you can imagine.
I can imagine that. And maybe, so you partly love them, you partly hate them, or researchers partly love them because of what they make possible. And I guess that the same sort of tension might also be present in Pretoria, where you are, Beth and Khawulile, where you, on the one hand, indeed support some of these deals and make a lot of things possible to improve visibility, especially internationally and in the English language scholarly system. On the other end, you might have some doubts. Is this a big discussion in Pretoria, or is it just sort of daily practice where people simply do with what they have and not discussing it?
I think we understand that it's expensive to be in these deals, and everybody's complaining about budget cuts. But having these deals has really improved publications for the University of Pretoria. And our researchers are really embracing it, and they're making use of them. And we advocate that they do, because we are already in these agreements. So our researchers are publishing under these agreements. Yeah, I haven't heard of any talks of leaving the agreement, no. But we are just embracing them. We know that it should be an interim solution to get to where we want to be in terms of publishing open access. But at the moment, we're here and we're embracing them and we're publishing, and we see a return of investment.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and indeed, culture change goes slowly, and you mentioned an interim solution. We're waiting or working towards more sustainable long-term solutions. But meanwhile, we have to do with what we have, and not lose sight, of course, of the interest of researchers in their daily practice. Maybe a related question for South Africa, Pretoria, is you mentioned, Beth, the system of subsidies that was very much, which also subsidizes research in institutions. It's very much depending on journals that researchers publish in, and being recognized in international databases. You mentioned Web of Science and Scopus. I wonder, I think other databases, like, for instance, Directory of Open Access Journals, is also there. And how does that work? Is it really sort of very binary? Okay, it's in the system, so you get the money if you publish in that journal, and once it drops out of Web of Science, or drops out of Directory of Open Access Journals, you get zero money if you publish in a journal. Is that strict?
It is that strict. That's exactly how it works, actually. DOHA is one of the indexes at the moment that is included. And actually, there's quite a lot of debate about whether it should be or not, because there are concerns about quality of some of the journals and predatory journals, for example, as well. There are quite a lot of issues of research integrity that are related to the subsidy system. And because of this, so researchers will deliberately target journals that are included on these databases. And if they can find that they're included in terms of a transformational agreement, for example, as well as getting a subsidy, then it's considered a huge bonus. But there isn't a way in which we're directly saying you should publish open access or not. It simply is, if you publish in one of the journals that's on the system, then you would get the subsidy to your institution. And the institutions are competing for this funding, and some of them are becoming quite sly, perhaps, about how they do it, not necessarily very ethical in how they behave. But yeah, I mean, you're competing for funding, and you're either in or out in terms of the list. Yeah.
Susan, I wondered, I guess that in the wider African context, things might also be different, with South Africa being one of the more wealthy countries within South Africa, and it might be different also in different language areas in Africa. So I wondered, for African journals online, the diversity, do you see journals there really struggling to cope, struggling to get submissions because of the maybe pressure to publish in journals that are in Web of Science and Scopus, which probably many in African journals online are not. Some of them will be, some of them not, and the same for Directory of Open Access journals. Not all journals will be registered, or some even do not want to be registered in the Directory of Open Access journals. So what is the feedback you get from those journals regarding their standing and acceptance as venues in their countries where they are?
Thanks for the question. South Africa is an outlier in the African continent in this system that we've just been speaking about in terms of the way the fees are structured, and unfortunately, universities in South Africa come to rely significantly on income for ongoing functionality of the institution as a whole on the system of subsidies. It's not something that we would advocate other African countries adopting at this stage, or anywhere else really. So as regards inclusion and emphasis on northern indexes and such as Scopus and Web of Science, these commercial things, unfortunately there is still given the complexities of the contexts that we work in, it is difficult to make generalizations, and I'm always worried about doing so, but in this instance I do feel it's warranted. There is still an unfortunate implicit notion that foreign is better, and that inclusion of a journal in one of those kinds of structures is the ultimate in terms of a quality marker. That said, it has been restrictive in that the careers and the topics of research that are chosen by early career researchers within the continents can be morphed to those that are of interest to inclusion in publications that are in the global north. Basically, it's a kind of an intellectual brain drain of research into topics of interest elsewhere instead of within the context that the researchers are working from. But that's exactly what AGL works to offset. We have a very clear and transparent and thorough system of assessment and transparency that allows both authors and researchers and readers to have trust in the journals that are included in the AGL system. And it's also not a binary approach that we have. which is what a lot of these what the Northern indexing commercial entities have. You're either in or you're out. Ours is a kind of a graduated system that allows a progression and a transparency of what the journals are actually attaining, and it functions as a learning tool to stimulate continuous learning. We provide a lot of training and support and mentoring, and so also just slightly off topic from this. We're based on free and open source software, including open journal system software, and we have economies of scale in terms of a lot of the technical solutions of the kind of the publishing services that we provide to the continent. So I do think that these sorts of entities from the global south, Latin America certainly leads in this respect, are becoming more and more well recognized. And I think it's going to take explicit inclusion in institutions within Africa in order to offset this sort of rather informal way of saying, in order to progress in your career and be respected, you need to publish an XYZ journal in XYZ country or continent. Stopping there, and just to add, Agile is a signatory of DORA and of COARA, and endorsing those and hoping to be more active going forward in both.
And thank you for that, Susan. And mentioning DORA brings us to Monica, maybe. Maybe, Monica, also, you have been working at Cambridge on the Cambridge Open Equity Initiative pilot, which is a way to maybe make the offering of a commercial publisher more equitable. And you have been successful in that, and it's now sort of structural. Would you say that that is a model that actually is really feasible and sustainable for all commercial publishers, or are you having a sort of first mover advantage there? Because would there be enough money in the system, enough institutions willing to fund access to journals in that way?
Sure, thank you. So I'll respond on the DORA piece and then Cambridge University Press, and just kind of echoing what Susan has said and what others have said. There's a direct connection between research assessment reform, so changing how researchers are measured and how academic success is measured, and equity, particularly moving beyond journal prestige, recognizing many research and outputs, and using context-sensitive review like narrative CV. So this is directly tied to the themes, and there are guidelines for publishers. There are DORA guidelines for publishers. I'm sure Agile is already doing many of these, Susan. On Cambridge, just a quick correction. We're not a commercial publisher. And so, Jeroen, you described us as having like first mover advantage. No, it happens all the time. I think it's because we're large. We're a large publisher, but we are mission-driven nonprofit, and any surplus goes back into the university. So I think in terms of the Cambridge Open Equity Initiative, it has been very successful. And for those who aren't familiar with it, what it is it's a community-run, collective, sort of completely voluntary way that Cambridge, libraries all over the world, and institutional partners can remove APCs for corresponding authors that goes beyond waivers. And what I really like about COEI is that as an author, I don't want to have the experience of wondering, is this for me? Will I qualify for a waiver? I don't think there should be any extra barriers. So COEI at acceptance, you are in, your article is accepted. You are not prompted to ask for a waiver. You don't have to, come begging for help. So it's a really nice program in that way. So again, it's jointly funded by the press and library partners. We started in 2023. It covers all of our journals, so we're not just choosing certain journals. And there are many, many countries. Nick shared the link, and many institutions. And we've published over 600 art research articles so far. And I think what's really interesting is how directly this has connected to our open access numbers. So we're really humble about it, but we are leading in open access far beyond our peers and the big five commercials. And 75% of our research articles were published open access last year. We just don't talk about it because we're quite shy. And we are flipping our whole journal program to open. So by the mid-2030s, we will be completely open. And I think there's a conversation about transformative agreements and transitional agreements and lumping them all together. But maybe we put that to the side for now. I think good transformative agreements are temporary. I think what's quite interesting about COEI, maybe for this audience, is the institutional partner support model. So basically, libraries can feed into this model. They can pay as little or as much as they like. In the UK, JISC has sort of determined what a reasonable donation amount will be, but it can be just a few pounds. And it's a small annual fee, and it is increasing year on year dramatically. Generally, what we find is libraries like to share that they are participating in this kind of in their LibGuide in the open access section, where they'll talk about kind of any kind of publishing model that they have with the press. And then to answer your question directly, I think from my background, having been in libraries, now being at a publisher, being in many volunteer groups, there is no one model for everything, and we need a variety of models, and we need bibliodiversity in terms of models. All diamond, all TAs, all what have you, is not going to work in every single context that I see now. So I think this is one really interesting example of a pilot that I wish more publishers would try. And I think we've been willing to experiment with it. We've been willing to sort of eat the cost of it as we see how we can make it sustainable. But I wish more publishers would do it. But yeah, we're not doing it for competitive advantage, certainly.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Monica. And sorry for lumping Cambridge in with commercial publishers.
Don't worry, it happens constantly.
I was interested in whether the model would be transferable to commercial publishers. Maybe opening up this also for questions from the chat. I'm just looking at the chat. There's a question there from Naomi Wells, who says, "Thanks so much for a really interesting discussion. And multilingualism has been mentioned as central to equitable publishing. What are the panel's thoughts on the challenges and opportunities for encouraging multilingual publishing practices?" So, and you already mentioned, Monica, like pluralism sort of being the answer. There is not one model that will solve all the issues. So any of the people on the panel, so really, especially also in Africa with all its languages, are there any solutions more favorable to foster multilingual approaches in publishing? Anyone would like to react to that?
May I
jump in
respond?
there.
Go ahead.
Susan, you go first. I'll come after.
Certainly. At Agile, we include all languages. We require only that keywords and metadata are provided in English for the sake of discoverability and machine-readable discoverability. So there are some journals that publish only in Kiswahili, for example, or only in Arabic, or and there are many titles that accept articles in the same issue published in different languages. And we are struggling a little bit because there is no, I think AI is probably going to potentially assist with this, although the training is a little bit scarce in some African languages for it to be based on. But there is no API to detect accurately African languages, although there is a vast number of them represented on the Agile system. One of the interesting things that we have noted, though, is that in those African countries that are working on policies to support their domestic publishing, we prefer the term domestic to local, which we find a bit derogatory. International being the global north and local being the global south, in kind of to put it frankly, those are the real meanings of those terms. In those countries that are trying to support domestic publishing and to put a more enabling environment in place for them, we are seeing that there's a focus on the English kind of as the lingua franca of international scholarly discourse, to the extent that, for example, Algeria, which was primarily French, also Arabic, has actually legally changed their language of secondary education and scholarly publishing from French to English within the last kind of year and a half. So while there are absolutely increasing options and ways for Indigenous languages to be used to share domestically conducted and published research, and possibly to make that of more accessibility and utility to the people who actually need that information to change lives and to work in the real world on the basis of that new knowledge. There still does seem to be the pull towards the northern discourse systems.
Yeah, I wonder, Beth, is there a way to relate multilingualism in publishing to the reward system? Is there a possibility to reward people to publish in their local language, or is that hard to realize?
So that should be great, but I think this is a problem that's really difficult to overcome. And just to give a South African example specifically, we have 11 official languages. And during the apartheid era, when we had just two, really, the English and Afrikaans, then Afrikaans journals were also very popular, but also very insular, because they could only be read within the country as well. And what we found is that as the country becomes more outward facing and as metrics become more important in terms of assessment, is that there is no way to publish in a local language that will keep your research visible globally and for markets across the world. But at the same time, to publish in a local language, you're not going to have a local readership either, because the language of academia is English in South Africa, some Afrikaans perhaps to some extent. There we do see some kinds of incentives for people to publish in their own languages, but it's small. I mean, someone will be celebrated for being the only one publishing in a specific language. There's no the costs of producing a journal in a single language for a very tiny market would be prohibitive, and it would not be sustainable in any way. So while there could be some kinds of rewards for it, I'm not sure what platforms people would be using. There wouldn't be a journal that someone could publish in. So we do see very occasional books in local languages, often translated from an English book in any case. So if the researcher has produced it in both languages, perhaps. But multilingualism is a problem,
Yeah, I wonder, because the multilingualism is of course an aspect of bibliodiversity, but there's these other aspects of format. Like, are we maybe too much just looking at scholarly journal articles? Maybe also sometimes a model that is taken from natural and life sciences and also pushed into other disciplines, and are maybe to the detriment of all kinds of other formats that are maybe also more tied to really reaching out to audiences beyond just the scholars. So maybe to more with the name of societal impact, reaching people in policy or local communities. And is our system able to do that? Able to, in terms of rewards, but also in terms of infrastructure or journals allowing other types of publications, allowing maybe reports or of reports of collaborations or policy oriented publications, or maybe also looking at more at the open science, maybe reports on tools or on software or on data sets. So do you see any developments towards that? And I'm asking any of you, in supporting moving away from just that focus on journal articles. Please just open your mic if you got any idea on whether that's being promoted.
I had something small for the last question, actually, which is just to say, I put it in the chat as well, but I worked at Google Scholar a few years ago, and we did, I think, a pretty good job getting multilingualism into that index. We ran into a lot of trouble because the major commercial citation indexes required an English abstract and English metadata. And this becomes a really big problem. And I worked really closely with technical colleagues at OJS, but it's very hard to have two sets of metadata for one article. And I will just say that Cielo does a really excellent job in versioning and having many different versions of the same article with separate sets of metadata for each version of that article. But it's a lot of extra work. So I think it should be as easy as possible to do multilingualism. But what we need to avoid is making sure that everything doesn't just get slapped on a layer of English language metadata, which also makes discovery really difficult if you're searching in non-English languages. But that's sort of a technical solution. And I think in terms of sort of rewarding a more diverse set of outputs, this is one of the core kind of responsible research assessment, research reform focuses all over the world. And I don't mean to sound grim, but it's an incentive problem. And I think until we see more credit for these kind of outputs being seen as important academic work and sort of as critical because they are as a published journal article, we aren't going to see changes. So I think it's a real incentive problem. I think there have been so many pilots on modular articles and early research outputs, and we have lots and lots of platforms for it. But we need to actually reward researchers for putting these into the ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you. Sarah, maybe at York, do you see any kind of development there? Those are other types of outputs being rewarded and acknowledged more, or?
We are trying to make progress in that in terms of looking again at our promotions criteria and the examples given in those to make, because it's I think it's a fairly standard thing that what's specified in the things like promotion criteria is publishing in high quality journals and etc. So I think just we're inserting more examples of different types of outputs, different types of engagement activities, just to make it a bit clearer, because it was quite neutral before. But what we found and reflected that actually that just plays into people's assumptions that all you're talking about is journals, and that you just need to be talking more about the other types of impact and engagement activities that academics do undergo and do participate in.
Thank you. Khawulile, sorry, I saw that you had your hand up, please.
I just wanted to mention that as the University of Pretoria, to support multilingual publishing, though it's something that is small, but we launched a pilot project that was led by the Library Services and Data Science for Social Impact to translate abstract at least of our thesis and dissertation into 3 indigenous languages, which are Sepedi, isiZulu, and Afrikaans. And we use AI and human expertise to achieve that goal. So with this project, we were just aiming to decolonize the knowledge and strengthen academic vocabularies and bridge the digital divide for African languages. I don't know any specifics about rewarding local languages, but that's what we have done. And I think the system as a whole, if the system still recognizes that we published in the journals that are indexed in Web of Science and Scopus, then we are not going to achieve in terms of the languages, because we do not really invest in local publishing
Thank
platforms.
you very much, Khawulile. And I think that is sort of that sort of sums it up, the whole problem. So the incentives, we're running towards the full hour, so I have to wrap up. So the incentives, but also the need to really do all those small steps in supporting and moving away, a lot of practical, a lot of technical discussions, maybe with the big elephant in the room that we haven't addressed, but you mentioned it. AI maybe turn that into our advantage and not disadvantage, which is a completely other challenge, of course. So thank you, Khawulile, and thank you all other panelists for your marvelous contributions to this discussion. It will go on. We haven't solved it, but there are some interesting connections to be made. Thank you all for your insights. And to all the people attending, please look at the pages on the CAN website if you want to register for more sessions. Thank you again for being here. I really enjoyed it. And I hope you did as well. And thanks again to all the panelists, Monica, Sarah, Susan, Khawulile, and Beth, for sharing your thoughts. Have a good day and stay safe all.